there's a lot more to atheism than we realize. And so the standard atheist narrative is completely false. So let me start. Let me just jump in. Okay. The series is called Atheism or Death, and Sam, I will share the slides with you so that you can review them and use them yourself. And we're going to talk about the atheist cult of reason, because atheism, modern atheism, literally started as a cult. And it was called the cult of reason. It was a religious cult. And yeah, we'll talk about its earlier history, but we're going to talk about its history of socialism, of violence and subversion, and also its very close connections to Satanism and to the occult. So, okay, starting off with Carl Sagan. Now, Carl Sagan, he's friends, and when you read about him, they all profess, or they all state, and he professed that he was an agnostic. However, for all intents and purposes, he was an atheist. He spoke like an atheist. He argued like an atheist. So, from what I've read of him, he may as well have been an atheist. I think many people just claim to be agnostic because they don't want to deal with the stress of being called an atheist for whatever reason in their culture, in their company. It's something difficult to deal with. So for social reasons, he says an atheist is someone who is certain that God does not exist. So he clearly has never heard the modern atheist definition of atheism. Someone who has compelling evidence against the existence of God. I know of no such compelling evidence. Now, this is where atheists jump out and say, Carl Sagan is not my scholar. Right? Because they say, no. An atheist can make up his own gender. We don't follow the dictionary. Right? Sorry, his own definition. My bad. It's the same thing. Right? And he says here, God can be relegated to remote times and places and to ultimate causes. We would have to know a great deal more about the universe than we do know to be sure that no such God exists. So I would call on this at least that maybe atheists are jumping the gun a little too quickly here, but yeah, I've had atheists say that I'm lying about this, that this is a false quote, that and the whole usual Islamic not my scholar thing. Right, but understand, I just thought I'd start with this to annoy people. Right. Now, socialist atheism is a political religion. You cannot separate atheism from socialism. Socialism is a precursor, a requirement for socialism. Atheism is a precursor, requirement for socialism, and the two are integrated. So, the claims I'm going to make, and we're going to back this up through the series, socialism is a socio-political religion. It is a theocracy. It is a simulacrum of Christianity. Secular humanism is an atheist religious doctrine. It is a simulacrum of Christianity. It is, in other words, a copy of, it's a fake imitation, a cheap Chinese knockoff of Christianity. Atheism is religious, and it is inherently socialist and theocratic. Atheism and humanism are religions as per the US Supreme Court. Atheists went to the Supreme Court to argue that they are a religion, and the Supreme Court agreed. So atheists spent a lot of time and money to be formally recognized as a religion. So when the village atheist, which rhymes with village idiot, claims that atheism is not a religion, I refer you to the US Supreme Court. And the atheists who insisted, these highly educated atheist organizations with their money and their lawyers, they insisted they are a religion. And of course, now we're going to hear they're not real atheists. Any comments, Sam, before I continue?
So this is all documented, because this is news to me, that atheists petitioned the US Supreme Court. Now, atheism is recognized as a religion.
As a religion. Yes, we'll get into all this.
Okay.
Sorry?
That's all I want to know, because this is documented, because this is news to me. It's the first time I knew this. And because the atheists won't tell you, but you got the documentation. Glory.
No, there's a reason. So there's this series could easily be 9 or 10 shows, right, on different topics, because they had to realize afterwards they made a mistake. Because now the law would apply to them and they could not proselytize, because atheism is a proselytizing religion like Islam. The problem is now that this put the same restrictions on Christianity that have now been imposed through lawfare on Christian doctrine in public places and schools and so on. So they had to deny being a religion so that they could claim that they are just pushing secular beliefs as opposed to, yeah. And that is true, Keo. That is 100% correct. Atheism and secular humanism are historically violent and irrational. Oh, I see a violent and irrationality. Sorry, I just changed that. So let me fix my little typo there. Okay, violent and irrational. Yeah, I changed that sentence. So that's why that changes. They're violent and irrational. Atheism and humanism are proselytizing religions like Islam. Atheism in government is invariably totalitarian and genocidal. So a picture can express 1,000 words. So here's 2,000 words on atheism, and we're going to go through this presentation and we're going to show you exactly why. Right. So we'll start with modern atheism's roots. We go back about to the beginning of the 1700s, to roughly the mid-1700s, especially in France during the Enlightenment. And we're going to learn a great deal about that. This is a man called Diderot. He is an atheist philosopher. He wrote a lot about how to create social change, etc., etc. He wrote what was called he was one of the contributors to the Encyclopédie, which was a new encyclopedia of science. Science was replacing religion. This whole superstition was being replaced with this new idea, this new ideology of scientism, which atheism is obviously part of. And he wrote that, now don't forget, the Enlightenment is something atheists always appeal to as the age of reason, the age of rationality, and they appeal to all of these Enlightenment figures, these Enlightenment philosophers. And we're going to see just how racist and debauched, depraved, and satanic these people all were, and psychopathic too. So atheism in Diderot and d'Alembert's Encyclopédie is the opinion of those who deny the existence of a God in the world. The simple ignorance of God does not constitute atheism. To be charged with the odious, the dirty title of atheism, one must have the notion of God and reject it. Right, so this is where modern atheism starts. Right, now atheists will make all sorts of wonderful claims for their past. We'll get into all of that. But this is where modern atheism starts. It is to know there's a God and deny it. You can't simply have you can't simply have a little feelings that there's no God. But anyway, we'll move on. We'll discuss all that. With Voltaire, he advocated the destruction of religion. He once stated that he wanted to live long enough to see the last king strangled by the entrails of the last priest, implying he wanted to see the monarchy and Christianity violently destroyed. Pre-Enlightenment science did not exist as a motivator to push people to atheism. Back then, science was in its infancy, providing evidence that less academic factors were at play. Atheism is propagandized as intellectual, and in the future I will go through this history. I will go in detail through the history. Historically, it is linked to political and social factors, and it's a reaction to the establishment of the time. Basically, it is a belief that is in opposition to the status quo. It is always in opposition. Think about it. What is the opposite of theism? The opposite of theism is atheism. So atheism is not a default position. It is a reaction to theism. So Sam, your thoughts before I continue.
So this quote that you just showed, and I'll try not to interject as much, strangled by the entrails of the last priest. So that tells you that atheism is intentionally violent and wants to not only eradicate religion, but people that believe it, huh? So it's just like
it is revolutionary. Yes, like it is jihadist. Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes, correct.
All right. Just want people to see that when atheists tell you they just want to be free of religion. No, they want to eradicate people with their religion, not just religion. Watch this.
Right, so no, atheism was not founded upon the slaying of God by the sword of reason, which is the image they try to evoke. It was simply rebellion against church and state with the intent to establish a new utopian state, with a new man in the image of man, not God. All right, so now Diderot, without going into too much detail of his history, he got into financial trouble. He sold his library, and it was bought, okay, by the monarch, the Empress Catherine the Great of Russia. She was a fan of his work. With her patronage, her money, Diderot completed his philosophical program, and because he had the leisure to stay with her for 2 years or whatever, and he was able to add a dimension of political radicalism. And he traveled to St. Petersburg. He was there 1773 to 1774. And with the money that he earned, he was able to enter into a leisurely retirement in Paris where he continued to write. So he was a real champagne socialist. He wanted to kill the monarchy, except when they wanted to give him a lot of money. Then it was convenient. Right? Right, so that's Diderot. So that's the definition of atheism. It is an active rejection, an active denial of God. It's not simply this patently stupid lack of belief. We'll discuss that in the future. So atheism is the cult of reason. During the French Revolution, reason referred to a belief in rationality, science, and the rejection, the active rejection of traditional religious beliefs and practices. But not only that, active rejection of the current structures of the world, the way the world was structured. So the cult of reason emerged during the French Revolution, seeking to replace Christianity with a new religion, a religion based on reason and rationality as they defined these words. Bradley, wow. Yeah, that's quite a journey. So the cult of reason was founded in 1793 as part of the de-Christianization movement, which was a government program. It was led by radical revolutionaries who believed that traditional religions of Europe were oppressive and irrational. And the way that they were going to get rid of traditional religion was by murdering all of the religious people. And a new religion based on reason and rationality was needed to replace them. So the cult was based on the principles of enlightenment philosophy, which emphasized reason and rationality in human affairs. And the cult's leaders believed that reason was the key to unlocking the potential of humanity to make men gods, creating a more just and equitable society, socialism. Now, this aligns, and we will find out, this aligns with both socialism, we're looking at Marx, Lenin, Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot, as well as Satanism. This aligns perfectly. Atheism and Satanism are perfectly compatible. And we're going to be having a look at that as we go. And the cult of reason believed that reason was the only legitimate basis for both morality and ethics, that traditional religious beliefs and practices were irrational and superstitious. The members all rejected a supernatural god and they worshipped the goddess of reason. In other words, they worshipped Isis, the Egyptian pagan deity, who was their goddess of reason. And this was personification of the cult's values and beliefs. So, okay, you can stop me anytime, Sam. You can interrupt anytime. So, although this cult of reason was very short-lived, it had a huge impact on the course of the French Revolution and the development of modern secularism, atheism, and also what we now call scientific socialism. So now we'll talk about a guy called Plutarch. Plutarch is a philosopher, Greek philosopher. So the atheist French government recycled old ideas of primitive religion that they acquired from Plutarch. He was the most read philosopher amongst the Enlightenment thinkers and the people in the French Revolution. So they took these old, primitive, pagan ideas and they refashioned them into the new state religious cults. They started two cults. One was the cult of reason and the other was the cult of the supreme being. They were enlightened because they were based upon nature and reason, not special revelation from God. That's what they believed. Because now one of the things that they realized was they couldn't simply leave a vacuum of belief. They needed to have something that gave people something to believe in, structures. They couldn't simply remove the old supports from society. So they had to develop religions that mimicked religions, provided these social functions religion provided, but were not Christian. Now, let's have a look at Plutarch. This is an interesting book by Alan Brown. It's 60 pages, will cost you $5 on Amazon. And it's How Socialist Was National Socialism. And he explains how National Socialism, National Communism, was communism. It's just Marx had his version of communism, and Mussolini had his version of communism or socialism, and this guy had his version of socialism. But he says, but Gray utilizes Plutarch to great effect, and the Greek's words could easily read like a description of Nazi Germany. So the most famous philosopher of the French Revolution, atheists, and of these Enlightenment atheists that atheists appealed to, sounds like a Nazi. So he, the leader, trained his fellow citizens to have neither the wish nor the ability to live for themselves. But like bees, they were to make themselves always integral parts of the whole community, socialist. Clustering around their main leader, almost beside themselves with enthusiasm and noble ambition, and to belong wholly to their country. So they had to worship the dear leader. These are the beliefs of Plutarch. This is what he believes a perfect state is like. Gray's point is that in ancient Sparta, the individual was completely subordinated to the general ends of the community, and such subordination is of the very essence of socialism. So Plutarch was effectively a socialist, could be classed with the Nazis. Your thoughts, Sam, before I go on?
So we can blame the Greeks for all these problems. You darn Greeks. Islam
Yes,
was
we can go way back to the Greeks.
right.
Sorry?
Islam, Kalam was influenced by Greeks, Aristotle, and so on. And now we see socialism influenced by Greeks. What problem hasn't been the result of you Greeks? You Greeks have been the problem of the world, Ortho Christos. Just want you to keep that in mind.
Yeah, Kio says very correctly, everything within the state, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state. Very, very true. That is correct. I believe that's a statement by Mussolini. So yes, every man was implanted with the conviction that he belonged not to himself, but to the state. So do you see the ideas that these French Enlightenment thinkers were taking? Were ideas that are not what we would call enlightened at all. Right now, this is called minor marriage in early Islamic law. We covered this a week or so ago. Revisionist notions assert that typical Roman marriages took place for girls above the age of 18. Numerous studies detail prepubescent marriages of Roman girls and their early consummation. The Greek Plutarch assumed the cultural phenomenon of child marriage to lie in the Roman desire for an unformed character and an untouched body. So now they not only appealed, of course, just to Greeks, but also to Roman philosophers, because they felt that that was the ideal state. Now, of course, if you want to embrace Rome, then you're going to have to embrace this kind of kiddie fiddling as well. Right. Just to let you know, but Plutarch features here as well. And this is the kind of appeal that we're making to this era. This is what they want to bring back. Now we'll mention an atheist occult enlightenment. So I need to put a few pieces on the table as I usually do, and then I'll start tying those pieces together. For the French revolutionaries, or you can call them for the French jihadis, nature was a way to legitimize their policies and laws, equated with the rule of law during the mythical Golden Age. The leaders of the revolution repackaged pre-Christian religious traditions as a new, rational, and natural religious system for the French Republic. Remember, this is the very first atheist republic, where atheism has become the state religion. And in fact, Christianity is outlawed. It's illegal and you will be killed. And in fact, they start the world's first modern genocide, and they become the first police state because atheism is so rational. So these laws, religious system of the French Republic, stripping off the superstition of the church and returning man to a mythical golden age guided by general revelation. So by man's brilliance. This is man worshipping himself. Right, thanks, Ortho Christos. So these state religions married paganism to the then in vogue, quote-unquote, natural philosophy, proclaiming the new syncretic belief as rational. The French thinkers turned to their personal libraries to gain insight into what primitive religion looked like. So the French revolutionaries, the Enlightenment thinkers, studied pagan religion, primitive religion. So they took elements from long-defunct religions and heretical practices, then proclaimed that the state's authority came from nature herself, not the Judeo-Christian God, the church, or the monarchy. Any thoughts, Sam, before I go on?
It's becoming quite obvious, the satanic roots of atheism, in that its goal is to eradicate Christianity. Isn't that a common feature of all these religions like Islam?
Yes.
Which shows you that it's satanic at its very core. It is of the devil because their goal is eradicate Christianity. What a coincidence. But
yes. Now one of the sources I'm using here is John V. Fleming, The Dark Side of the Enlightenment. It's called Wizards, Alchemists, and Spiritual Seekers in the Age of Reason. You must understand that the French Revolution, they speak of reason, and then Enlightenment, they speak of reason. What they do forget to mention is that these people were all occultists, and we're going to be digging into some of that. All of these people were occultists, Satanists, you name it. I mean, you'll see the clues are all there. John Fleming's book discusses Rosicrucianism along with alchemy and other occult experiences in England and Germany, with some discussions of the French experience. Enlightenment philosophers throughout Europe nurtured the flame of occultism. Enlightenment philosophers were occultists. And through practices such as Freemasonry, they enabled the fire to flare up again. So these philosophers that atheists worship today were occultists. Your will be done versus God's will. Now, atheists will say religion and all these things. Greeks a sprinkle of Romans, but the French and Germans really did turbocharge this cult. They did. Now, it's all just superstition. That's what you basically hear atheists say. This is all just superstition. But that is a Marxist position. That is a Leninist position. In fact, that's a heretical position as well. But basically, atheists are in perfect alignment with Marx, Lenin, Mao, Pol Pot on that point, that's all superstition, because they believe that history has a purpose, that man has to evolve, and that religion was a superstition that must be abandoned for the new science of humanity, which Marx is going to bring you, Lenin is going to bring you, the French Revolution, and we're going to see the atrocities, the barbarity that they descended into. It's far worse than people realize. So now this idea that it's all superstition overlooks very important distinctions. The occult is distinct from a religion in fundamental ways. Marx was a Satanist, Abdelmasih. Marx actually wrote satanic poems. He actually wrote poems. He was very fond of the idea of satanic practices. He wrote, shall we say, in fond ways about Satan, as did Engels. You'll find this in their writings. So, yeah. All of these people were involved in some ways in the occult or influenced by the occult. So religion tries to understand the world. The occult, you try to exert control over the world. I know that they try to say, oh, religions just try to control you. Well, no, you're trying to understand the world. With the occult, you're trying to master the world. You're trying to exert control over it through spells. Right? Christianity is logos. God is logos. We do not reject science or reason. The occult embraces irrationality and immorality. Christian religion is based on belief in God. We pray for guidance, but the occult, they use rituals to cast spells or curses. Christianity requires spiritual growth. Occultism seeks power to manipulate by means of rituals. And God is logos. Once again, occult practitioners believe in forces that are beyond reason. Again, when I've spoken of the Sufis in the past, they believe in going to doing these rituals that take them into these states that are beyond reason. They call them post-rational or pre-rational states. Right? So an occultist usually operate in secret. There's nothing secret within Christian practice. Let me continue. I just wanted to throw that in there just to put some basic ideas out. So now we're going to look at Jonathan Israel, very well-known, very famous historian. He said the radical enlightenment cannot be simply equated with atheism. So in other words, not only equated with atheism. And he says here the radical enlightenment. Effectively, there were two enlightenments. Religious people played an important part in the radical enlightenment, as they did in the French Revolution, but they were always Unitarians or Socinians of some kind.
Oh, I love that part. Guys, did you catch it? These radical enlightenment Satanists, they were Unitarians. They outright reject the deity of Christ, and they assume he is merely a human. And if you guys don't know what Socinians are, you find them today. They go under different disguises. One disguise is Christadelphians. Carlos Xavier and his father-in-law, Anthony Buzzard, they are Socinians. Did you catch it? So it's a rejection of the Trinity and the deity of Christ, masked under being enlightened. But go ahead.
Yeah, so the Socinians were an anti-Trinitarian movement originating in 16th century Poland. Now, this Polish connection is so odd because it actually came from Italy. An Italian guy that settled in Poland that started it here. And then when they claim, oh, the Polish did, no, an Italian did it. And Italy's another story. That period in Italy, that's another long story. At its peak in the 17th century, the movement was influential throughout much of Central and Eastern Europe, including Transylvania, Hungary, and the Netherlands, England, France, and Germany. Remember, I also mentioned how the Sultan the Ottoman Sultan was actually funding and supplying help to the Protestants. And what happened was, in that period, in that part of the world, in Eastern and Central and Eastern Europe, what you had was the Ottomans were helping the Protestants, right, to fight. They were actually assisting them, giving them money, offering them troops, and so on, to fight against the Catholic Church. But also, the Protestants created tolerance. And with this tolerance, they said, well, now we can form our own religions away from the Catholic Church. And one of the first things they did was they created the Unitarian Church and a bunch of heresies. And Unitarianism, anti-Trinitarian Unitarianism, was accepted as a valid religion. Now, I think most of us would look at that and go, that's a heresy. That's wrong. But it was one of the official religions within that area. So yeah, so we can literally thank the Reformation for the development of this particular heresy and
So
for allowing it. Yes.
I want to comment on this because people are going to think that we're being anti-Protestant. No, that's not it. Facts are facts. Facts do not care for your feelings. Did you just hear, again, another fruit of the Reformation? Socinianism, Christadelphianism, is the fruit of the Reformation, where every man with his own Bible becomes his own pope. This is the fruit of Martin Luther and the reformers like John Calvin. Keep that in mind. These are facts. Facts don't care about your feelings. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah. So the core beliefs of Socinians were rooted in the concept of Unitarianism, the belief in one God. And anything that's in green generally has to do with Islam, okay? If I have it in green, it links to Islam. So the belief in one God without the Trinitarian doctrine. Socinianism, like Islam, believes there is only one God who is the sole creator, that Jesus was an important prophet, but he's not divine and he's not part of the Trinity. Both are monotheist. Yet Socinianism and Islam reject the doctrine of original sin, as does the Enlightenment. You want to add anything there, Sam? Or
I just want people to see that you're not being anti-Protestant and bashing. You're just stating facts, and the facts are there. Anyone can investigate. You didn't make this up. This is from primary sources. And the sad reality is that because of the fruit of the Reformation, you see all this sprung forth from the Reformation. Even what he's talking about, the Enlightenment, the post-Enlightenment, atheism, occultism, Socinism. I'm sorry to say this, folks. This is all connected to the rotten fruit of the Reformation, and I'm sure you would agree with me on that point.
it opened the door to all of these things. Yeah. So I'll continue. So, for instance, this is Jonathan Israel, the Radical Enlightenment, and he says, the Radical Enlightenment rejected all compromise with the past. It sought to sweep away existing structures entirely, aiming for a complete elimination of quote-unquote, well, Christian religious authority. I'm inserting the word Christian here, but this is what is meant, right? Suleiman the Magnificent funded the Protestants at the early stages, correct. And I discussed that the last time we did the show. I showed that connection. I showed the actual deep ties between the Muslims and and the things that were happening. So there's a lot there that is very uncomfortable. If you're a Protestant, like I'm a Protestant, it is very uncomfortable to look at these facts. So understand, the Radical Enlightenment is now, today, in 2023, coming to fruition. Men can now be pregnant. I mean, today I was very gratified to see an 85-year-old woman got up from her seat and she gave a pregnant man her seat on the bus. I thought that was beautiful. That was beautiful, Sam.
You actually, did that happen?
No, of course not. This is Poland. People are not out of their freaking minds.
Oh, man.
So understand, they sought to sweep away all structures, not just the church, but everything had to go. They needed to burn the whole system down and start fresh with this new crazy idea that they had. All right. So now let's have a look. Look at the kind of artwork that these guys produced. It's very religious in nature, but it's very Greek as well. And you might notice this very familiar looking salute here. Look familiar, Sam?
Hey, where did we see that before?
I don't know. I don't know. But it looks very nasty. It looks very nasty. Very, very nasty.
Oh.
Very.
To do with Nazism or even...
Right, so let's continue. So Plutarch was the most frequently read author by men during the French Revolution, and a very famous painter, and also someone who signed a lot of death warrants, called Jacques-Louis David. His work, such as The Oath of the Rati, you've just seen the painting, it became the official artistic style of the revolutionary government and eventually shaped the religious aesthetics of the state's secular cults, religious aesthetics of the atheist cults. Fascinating. These same names of these people in the French Revolution are associated with occult mysticism, with magic, Rosicrucians, Freemasons, etc. Freemasonry was a pseudo-religious practice that was much like the experience of Christianity. Freemasonry lodges allowed different social strata to interact, promoting skepticism and intellectual inquiry. These two are both propagandistic words. I'm not going to get into this now, but the word skepticism, there's an interesting history there. It doesn't mean what you think it means. The famous Neuf Soir Lodge in Paris had members such as Voltaire, the Abbé Sieyès, and the designer of the Republican calendar, Charles Gilbert Rome. We'll discuss that in a minute. And occultist, Antoine Court de Gebelin. And the Freemasonry lodges were catalysts in the years preceding the Revolution, and the Scottish Rite Freemasonry gained popularity in Catholic France during the 18th century. So we taught touching on Freemasonry. So this is Marat, Jean-Paul Marat. He was a martyr for the Revolution. His death, his assassination, kicked off the Reign of Terror and created the first atheist police state. So the first atheist state became the first atheist police state. Freemason, Freemason, I need to point that out. Jean-Paul Marat wanted heads to roll. From September 1793 to July 94, roughly 2,000 people monthly were publicly beheaded in Paris, mainly for their unwillingness to support the atheist jihad. Sorry, the atheist revolution. How am I mixing these words? He wasn't. Sorry. And so an anti-Christian eulogy was given by the atheist Marquis de Sade. Now the word, his name is the source of the word sadism, the word sadist. Wow. And Marquis de Sade was an atheist, and he compared Marat to Jesus Christ. Amongst other things, what they wrote was, "O heart of Jesus, O heart of Marat, their Jesus was but a false prophet, but Marat is a god. Long live the heart of Marat. Like Jesus, Marat detested nobles, detested priests, the rich, the scoundrels. Like Jesus, he led a poor and frugal life." Wow. And also what they... Sorry, go on.
Sorry. So he's now deifying the Jean-Paul Marat?
Yes.
My goodness, man, what blasphemy. Go ahead, brother. It just shocked me, these quotes.
This was standard practice. These were atheists, don't forget. But don't worry, Sam. Just like Islam's a religion of peace, so you can show your address to people online now, live, no problem. Okay. I live on number 123 Bakalaka Dhaka Street. Okay, just so you guys know. By the same token, atheism is just a lack of belief. It doesn't write anything. It doesn't make any ideas. It's just a lack of belief. Another thing to note is that what they did was they arranged his body, they put him on a chair, like on a throne, and they arranged his body to make him look regal so that they, when you see psychopaths in the movies, they always arrange the bodies. They murder someone and they arrange the body in an artistic rendition. These psychopaths in the French Revolution did that a lot. They did a lot of taking these bodies and arranging them in very macabre situations. So yeah, that's Marat, and it's made to look like he was Jesus here, basically. This whole... The Marquis de Sade, an induced abortion. Now, this is from the National Library of Medicine, from the National Institutes of Health, and it's the National Center for Biotechnology Information. In 1795, the Marquis de Sade published his book, Le Philosophique dans le Boudoir, in which he proposed the use of induced abortion for social reasons and as a means of population control. It is from this time that medical and social acceptance of abortion can be dated. Previously, the subject had been discussed in public, had not been discussed in public in modern times, because we don't want to see that an atheist and a sadist, the originator of the word sadism, had been the guy calling for abortion and population control. It was largely due to de Sade's writing that induced abortion received the impetus which resulted in its subsequent spread in Western society. De Sade held that all life was cheap. He held all life cheaply and spent most of his life attacking God and the Christian church. His book attacks established religion, morality, family ties, and social structures. And he advocates sodomy, incest, lust, and cruelty for its own sake. So he viewed that man is not responsible for his own existence and God, blah, blah. Anyway, he just went against everything religious. The realistic view, according to de Sade, was that since murder is such a trivial matter, destruction of an infant which has not achieved the age of reason is of small consequence. Now, here he's not talking about babies in the womb, right? Because don't forget, with the Romans, before a child was 2, the father could terminate that child. They could kill that child with no penalty from the state because that child under the age of 2 was considered to have not been developed. He hasn't developed a conscience, hasn't developed any kind of soul or reasoning. He's just an animal, an insect. Kill him, move on. And this is what they wanted to go back to. This is an atheist. This atheists need to own this.
And that's what we're seeing today. In fact, maybe you can confirm. I forgot the name. Even Planned Parenthood was started by a woman, and she deliberately targeted the black community because she wanted to bring the black community down and reduce their numbers. From what I was
social control. Yes.
Yep. It was all saying.
So,
you see where it comes from? It comes from this.
We're about to learn that he wasn't a true Muslim. Sorry, he wasn't a real atheist. We're going to learn that any moment now, you know. So, oopsie, did I just make a wrong mistake again? I forgot to fade away the, forgive me, I need to, let me just, you know, I'm just going to take it away for a moment because I forgot to remove this. Okay, let me just go back. Okay, so in 1795, the atheist Marquis de Sade published his book, and he said that all life is cheap, and he attacked the Christian church, right? He then advocated sodomy and incest, right? And lust and cruelty for its own sake. And this is what he said. Okay, so this comes from, there's the link, pubmed.ncbi.nlm. Just look for the article. Marquis de Sade and induced abortion. So you'll see that this is a legitimate article. I'm not making this up. Okay? And if you look for some of the photos that were drawn by some of the books he wrote, I mean, man, it's all just sexual perversion. It's crazy. Now, let's have a look at woke. Let's look at the origin of woke, and let's look at these fantastic Greeks that these atheists now appeal to. Why do they want all these famous Greeks? They appeal to them. Let's look at Aristophanes, who was a Greek playwright. We're going to Athens in the year 392 BC. The great urban Dionysia, when Aristophanes presented his comedy called Ecclesiazussae, or the Congress Women. So he depicts a teaching that was very fashionable in Athens at the time, right? And these are the people that are lauded by these atheists as the great thinkers, the great reasoners of Greece, and we want to go back to them. And this is where the French Revolution went. So the great Dionysia is also called City Dionysia. It's an ancient dramatic festival in which tragedy, comedy, and satirical, this is satire, right? But he was making fun of real things. Where this drama originated, it was held in Athens in March in honor of Dionysus, the god of wine. Okay, so the Congress women. The women of the city, wearing beards and dressed in men's clothing, come to the assembly and by a majority vote pass a resolution transferring all power in the state to women. Would that sound a little bit like feminazism?
Most definitely. And there's a picture, a woman with a beard, huh?
Yeah, I just thought I'd add this in there. And then also, like the French revolutionaries, one of them at least wanted everyone to wear the same clothing. I don't know where he got that idea.
Yeah.
Equality.
It's all converging again to one common source, isn't it? It's all connected.
The women use this power to introduce a series of political measures. And these are expounded in a dialogue between Praxagora, the leader of the women, and her husband, Bleperos. Here are some quotations. Praxagora, compulsory, universal, community property. In other words, everybody owns everyone else's property. The people own the property. This is what I propose. Across the board, economic equality to fill those fissures that scar our society's face. No more division between rich and poor. Does this sound familiar, Sam?
Yeah, but isn't it ironic that the elite want to stay rich and make us poor and collapse the middle class, even though here it says no rich and poor. So it's all a lie. Yep. They stay in power while they subjugate us. That's what it is.
Yep, of course. We will wear the same clothes. We will share the same food. My initial move will be to communalize the land and money and all property. And he says, but what about the landless man who is invisibly wealthy because he hides his money, his gold, in his pockets? What about him? And his wife says he will deposit all of his money in the fund. She doesn't explain how they're going to get him to give up his money and just put it in the public fund, but everybody's going to get everybody's money, right? I will knock out the walls. I will remodel the city into one big happy household where all can come and go as they choose. In other words, no borders. No borders. None of that border stuff. I'm pooling the women. I'm creating a public hoard for the use of every man who wishes to take them to bed and make babies. Right. And who's going to work the land and produce the food? And she says the slaves. So this leaves you just one function. When shades of night draw on, slip sleekly down to dinner. The state is not going to stint. We're not going to be cheap. The state's hand is full and open. Its heart is large. It'll stuff its menfolk free of charge, then issue them torches when dinner's done and send them out to hunt for fun. Now, this last quote is very reminiscent of Karl Marx. And Karl Marx had a very special affection towards his father, with whom he read Voltaire and Rousseau. And Voltaire and Rousseau shared very similar ideas to what we've just seen. Woke and socialism goes all the way back to pagan Greece. These Enlightenment thinkers went all the way back to pagan Greece. So yes, Sam, we can trace all of this back to pagan Greece. These are pagan ideas that the atheists have embraced and said, this is reason, this is rationality.
You know, here's what's a contradiction. She says that the slaves will work the land, but I thought we're all going to be one and equal. There's no division, but obviously...
Don't confuse me with the facts, Sam. Exactly. This is going to hurt my brain.
So, and even in this system, you still have humans who will be subjugated. So much for we're all the same. All right.
Yeah, do you understand? This is irrational. As I said, they embrace irrationality. They embrace contradiction. For them, there is no contradiction. It's whatever they decide is rational, is rational. It's not logos, it's anti-logos. So, atheism's anti-enlightenment. Now, this is William Kilpatrick's Christianity, Islam, and Atheism, the struggle for the soul of the West. It's helpful to think in terms of two enlightenments. The enlightenment that was nourished. Yeah, everyone's a slave, of course. Yes, everyone will be a slave, yeah. This philosophy, you need to listen to Dr. Oh, good grief, I just forgot his name now. New Discourses, James Lindsay. You need to listen to he's the heavyweight in this. This man's work is phenomenal right now on this. So there was the enlightenment that was nourished by Christianity, and the enlightenment that cut itself off from God. The first enlightenment, the Christian enlightenment, led to the American Revolution, the Declaration of Independence, the abolition of slavery, and the Civil Rights Movement. The radical enlightenment led to the French Revolution, the atheist reign of terror, the suppression of church by state, and the godless philosophies of Marx and Nietzsche and their offspring, the National Socialism of Hitler and communism. More recently, the abandonment of God has led to the regime of cultural relativism that regards rights as arbitrary constructions. So atheism, taken to its logical conclusion, and many atheists do say this, that you have no rights because the universe is random. There are no rights. There's only survival of the fittest, right? Whoever has the power. Basically, it's the law. It's the golden rule. Whoever has the gold makes the rules. Yes. So you see, all of these ideas are not Christian. Yes, Sam, you want to say something?
So you're basically telling me the way American politics is headed, it's heading to implementing this very idea, because this sounds like the progressives in America.
It is. It's the same idea. It goes back to 2,500 years ago, and it goes into the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, atheism. We're going to. I'm really just putting the pieces on the table. Is it making sense so far, Sam?
It is not only making sense. It's actually scary, because what you're telling me sounds like what I hear from our politicians on television, on YouTube, specifically the liberal progressives. This is what they're arguing for and pushing for. Pretty much they want to implement the system. This is what you hear. Now we know the source. It all goes back to the same source, and it's satanic and anti-Christian, anti-Christ.
Yes, all of it.